On this week's show, discussing the influence of innovation on the construction industry with Rose Hall from Axa XL. In this week's news, breaches of the week, meta pauses, why data science, and more. All right, we're back. Travis Voss, thanks for sitting in the co-pilot seat today. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me in. It's always good to be back and listen to you at normal speed instead of 1.5 speed on the ConTech Crew.
For those of you out there, Travis and a few others like to speed us up to 1.5. Although, didn't we say if we get it to 2, Josh Bone sounds like he's from the East Coast all of a sudden? And
he sounds
kind of listen to him.
It's almost Midwestern.
That's awesome. And our guest today, Rose Hall. Rose, how are you?
Never better. Happy to be here, Jeff.
It's great to have you sitting down with us. We're going to get back to that. You guys know how this goes. But before we do, let's get to the cause of the show. Stay tuned. We have a new partner. I know I've said that a few times, but trust me, we have a new partner coming. Save the date for the second National Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Summit, Kansas City, Missouri, March 27th to 29th, 2023. If you need resources on preventing construction suicide, go to preventconstructionsuicide.com. If you need help now, dial or text 988 from your mobile phone. Remember to check us out. That's right. The Crew is back on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/@the ConTech Crew, and we're streaming. We're back in the Google world, people. That's right. You can watch it all from your desks on one side now from your good old-fashioned YouTube channel, so we're happy to be back. Before we jump into the interview, though, James spoke with Marcus Kirkwood, Senior Vice President of North America for Fawn, about how the Fawn Way is bringing tech adoption to the field.
And I'm here with Marcus Kirkwood, Senior Vice President, North America for Fawn. For our listeners out there, that's FONN, Marcus, why did Fawn decide to enter the marketplace?
So we decided to make an entry into the marketplace because the industry's been struggling with a couple of things for years and years now. The construction industry has lagged behind every other industry in the world in regard to improving productivity. And second, as you guys know, we're having a harder and harder time attracting young talent to our industry. So we believe that if people are willing to do things the Fawn way, we can tackle both of those problems.
Awesome. What do you mean by the Fawn way?
Yeah. So the Fawn way is centered around technological adoption by people in the field. So we have created a tool that's usable for everybody on a job site. The information needed to become more efficient is often in the minds of those people performing tasks. So we think if we can take that data from them and turn it into actionable information for decision makers in the office, the entire job site becomes more effective.
All right. Rose Hall, how are you? I'm excited to sit down with you. I've gotten to know Rose over the last year. I wouldn't say you've launched onto the construction market. You launched into my purview of the construction world, and I started to see you all over the place. So I'm excited to get to sit down with you and have a conversation. You know, here at the Crew, we're kind of about the people and how we got here. So how did you find your way into the seat where you are today as Senior Vice President, Head of Innovations in the Americas, co-founder at Axa?
Co-founder of Axa XL's ecosystem. Little nuance. I didn't co-found the whole institution here. Although that's not the first time that's happened.
I was trying to read that long title out.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I'm a construction person by nature. I graduated from undergrad and graduate with degrees in civil engineering with a focus in construction. So sadly, I'm a construction geek through and through. Good for right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Came up through the ranks in construction and design, pre-con, estimating, purchasing. My last couple of years in the true construction industry was with Turner Construction and in the risk management department, which got me interested in insurance, risk transfer. And our main role was to work with the business units across the entire Turner organization and communicate what risk management was and what our insurance programs do and don't do, and how to use and not abuse them, so to speak. in an era where risk management was just becoming prolific in construction. So it was kind of a cool place to be, because you're introducing a new concept to builders who are tremendously good at building buildings, but maybe haven't contemplated the risk aspect of what we do as a construction industry for the low bargain price of single digit fees. So risk is paramount to the industry, and we just started to get a handle around it as an industry maybe 20 years ago. So that was a cool time to be a part of that movement.
Well, no, I wanted to take you back, because it's not, looking at your resume, so to speak, from the outside. It's I wouldn't have thought it until, realizing and getting involved in the pre-con space and the estimating space. That's really where you start managing risk, is from the earliest days. And I'm kind of interested how that then led into purchasing. It seems like risk was driving that way. Were you following, unbeknownst to you, the risk ball that was bouncing, or
manage risk early and often, right?
Right. Or was
maybe.
it? Or I was going to say, or was it an overt?
Well, and I started in design, so it actually goes further back in the value chain than pre-con, right? It goes into the design phase. Sadly, at the time, I won't try to say that there was anyone out there that was connecting those dots between, how to manage the risk from, and that's why they call it contracting, right? Because you're contracting with you're a contractor. Your main job is to contract the project out to various parties, whether it's the designer or the subcontractors and so on and so forth. But yeah, risk is prevalent through all of that. And yeah, managing risk early and often is definitely your best bet. But construction companies have learned recently, last couple of decades, that there's a tremendous amount of risk and there are ways to protect it, but there's also a tremendous amount of reward wherever there is risk, if you can leverage it the right way. So being in risk management is not just about getting rid of risk. It is about, what risk do you want to get rid of via insurance or risk transfer contract? Or what risk do you want to maintain because you're really, really good at it? And if you carry a significant amount of the risk, you can, and the higher the risk is, you can charge for that, right? Because you're taking on the risk. And if you can do it well, you can make a lot of money doing it. And contractors know this. So a very, very risky project, let's say, or a failing project, if an owner has a project that's failing and they fire the one general contractor and they go to look to contract with a new general contractor, that's a tremendous amount of risk the new contractor's taking on, right? And they can say, well, the cost of this is going to be much more than it was in the beginning. Why? Because of the risk. So they stand to, but if that second contractor is somebody who's really, really good at fixing troubled projects, they can say, I'm going to charge you double for this, but it's worth it because I'm going to deliver your project on time and you're not going to have to kick me off of it like you did the first one. And for that, I'm charging you a premium. It's exactly the same thing in every other thing we do in construction. Where there's more risk, there's more reward opportunity. So I just try to discourage folks from thinking about risk as a negative thing and that always has to be shirked away.
Oh, that brings up a couple of things. Transferring risk, but wanting to take a risk that, is going to drive you more money. How do contractors learn which risks they want to handle, which risks they need to insure for? How did that come to play? And if somebody's listening, how can they get better at understanding where those hidden profits are?
Well, that is why risk management departments exist. Exactly. So, for example, at Turner, within our risk management department, we had claims, legal, insurance, of course, purchasing, safety. It was all under one umbrella so that somebody could tie all of that together and say, okay, based on these multitude of factors, this is where we take on risk and this is where we don't. And that's a risk management strategy. And so, in the scenario that I just described, I sat with one contractor who said, we are exactly that. We are tremendously good at doing really troubled projects. Anytime a contractor gets kicked off the job, we're the first ones to raise our hand and say, I'll do it, because they're really, really good at it. It's a great business model.
Yeah, I would say that that's something that I've experienced in my time too, and that's something that I know we as a company take great pride in is stepping in and taking on those complex and risky projects. So it is interesting to hear that's an entire business strategy, right? Because I have always heard the money is where the risk is.
And risk is where the money is, right?
Right. That's true. That's true.
So, I was just going to pop in and tie that, actually take it one step further and tie that to innovation. So being innovative about the way you manage risk within your company can make you, can differentiate you as a construction company. So it's pretty innovative to think, well, I'm not just going to buy insurance for every risk I have on a job site. That's an innovative thinking. Somebody thought of that 20 some odd years ago and said, I'm going to take on some risk. What? No, I got it. We're going to take it on. We're not going to buy insurance for it, or we're going to have a large deductible, or we're going to have a captive, or we're going to have some sort of retention that has skin in the game. But don't worry, we're going to do things differently. We are going to innovate our way to making that decision profitable. And that's a form of innovation before innovation was a thing in construction.
No, I like that. And I like how you point out that innovation doesn't necessarily have to be technological, right? It's innovation is a change in the way we do things and a change in the way we think. Yeah. But I am a technologist, so I do like to hear ways, and something that I was thinking through as I was reading through your title and your intro is like, so, you have innovation in there, you have a lot of risk management, you have a technical background. So I thought of it this two ways. Obviously, there are ways now with whatever, all the stuff we know, the technology side to help manage and mitigate risk. But I'm imagining that injects some risk as well, right?
Yeah, sure does. So we've got to look at the risk differently in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of technologies out there, and you hit the nail on the head. Innovation does not equal tech, but tech can be a subset of innovation. It can also not be innovation at all, by the way. Like, just replacing your CRM system or replacing your enterprise system is just because that's tech does not necessarily mean it's innovative. When you add a piece of technology to either replace a manual process or enhance a human process or human decision making, you are both mitigating risk and adding risk. And that's why risk management is so dynamic, because when anything changes, you have to reevaluate, what risk do we want to keep? What risk do we want to insure? What risk do we want to transfer? And technology is no different. So as technology adoption is rising in construction, we have to consider, okay, I'm going to use a drone to take photos of an exterior wall for quality purposes. Now I'm removing a risk because I'm removing a human from dangling off the building inspecting seals, inspecting sealant. Now you're removing a human, but what are the risks of that? Additional risks of the drone. Suppose it loses battery power and drops and hits somebody in the head, right? I don't know. I'm making this up. But there's additional risks you have to think about. There's privacy issues. There's, all kinds of things that we haven't contemplated yet. And alongside of tech adoption, we have to be considerate of cyber risks. Gosh, even get into that. But as we're mitigating risk with technology, we have to also consider the risks that it's introducing and not be scared off by them. They're just the same as every other business risk we have. The choice is buy insurance for it, keep it, give it to somebody else.
That's interesting. Jeff?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about through this process, as you've changed, what are some of the innovative ways that you've seen constructors? So we hit the shift that you talked about earlier of, taking on projects that might be falling apart. What are some of the innovations, though, that maybe not everybody has that risk profile? What are some of the other innovations that you're seeing companies do? Because you're playing a nice role of looking over all these different companies and working with them. Where are some of those places that they're deciding to take on new risks, but to drive new rewards?
Yeah, so I look at technology in three main categories of risk. The first is technology that prevents an event from even happening, something risky from even happening. That would be, and that can be low tech or high tech. That can be everything from a harness that prevents you from falling when you slip, to things that prevent incidences from happening. IoT, water sensors that let you know when there's anomalous flow in the pipes and you can shut it off remotely, meaning you have prevented a leak. Those things prevent risk. They prevent bad things from happening related to risk. Let's say that. Then there's the second category of ones that mitigate the risk when the event has occurred. So the example I would give is in the water mitigation example, if you have a puck on the floor that tells you when water hits it, So now you know you have a leak, but you know sooner than you would have if you just discovered it on your own. Perhaps it was over the weekend. But the fact that the water hit it at all means you already have a water problem, right? So the event still happened. There's still damage, but it's much less than it would have been had it been discovered on its own. And then the third one is monitoring and optimization or efficiency kind of technology. And this would be, optimization, meaning turning a manual process into a technology process, making things easier. Smart badges and Autodesk and Procore, all of their data analytics, that's all very, very good stuff, but it still requires a human to make a different decision in order to change the risk. So simply monitoring and getting data in and of itself does not prevent risk, right? Somebody has to look at the data and make a different decision because of it. So those three categories are how we're looking as an insurer, how we're looking at the influence of technology and innovation on the risk profile of a construction company.
I think that's a great 3 buckets, because I think we've always talked about some of the buckets here. And I think we always in construction, at least it seemed, we've been so focused on that third bucket, that optimization and efficiency. But I want to go back, because I think the first bucket's the hardest, but I think probably the biggest bucket to really change, or at least from my opinion, it's the hardest to quantify. We have this discussion all the time, because I hear the ROI side of things all the time, return on investor return. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you quantify a mistake I never made?
Yep.
That's that you don't put a quantification around somebody putting a harness on and clipping in.
Unless you can capture near misses, and you can't always capture that. So my answer to that, Jeff, is you don't, and stop trying to. So
okay, but what do they? Okay, because so I hear that all the time. But what do they do then?
Who they?
How do you go after that? They, construction, anybody that's talking to you about, well, you got to give me an ROI before I'm going to buy it. Well, it's like,
I hate that.
It's going to prevent mistakes.
No, it's short-sighted. So I'll liken it to this. In risk management, years and years ago, people would say, well, what's the point of having a risk management department? That's a lot of overhead. What's the ROI? I don't know, better managing your insurance programs, better management of your profit margins, which are this big, better cohesion between your safety and your legal and your claims and your insurance and your operations and your purchasing, better strategy for the whole company. Like, there's a ton of valuable, and it's evidenced by the fact that all construction companies in the ENR top 400 have at least a risk manager, if not an entire department. So somewhere in the last 20 years, although nobody was able to quantify it, the industry decided that this was a valuable place to put money and resources. I look at innovation exactly the same way, and I try to tell this to every risk manager and innovation leader in all these construction companies. I say, don't try to put an ROI on it today. And if I talk with a slew of risk managers, I say to them, and most of them have been in the industry for a while, right? You go, 20 years ago, could you have put an ROI on risk management? No. Can you now? Oh, yeah. It's intrinsic, if not quantifiable. Innovation will be the same way, and we have to have the same leap of faith. We can't just say, I've always done it this way, and we'll be fine. Sure, you'll be fine till all your peers are doing it that way, and then you're left behind. So let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting that you put it that way, because I think that, like Jeff pointed out, we always hear those things, and you are starting to see a proliferation of people with titles like mine throughout the construction industry. Yet when it comes, so they'll put someone like me in that position, but then nitpick every choice and decision still throughout the entire process, because they're still looking for that ROI. So it's like they kind of get to that right mindset, but then they get stuck. Like, okay, well, I have this person in this role and they want to spend $75,000 on the software. I don't see the ROI. And we're back to that same conversation. And it's kind of funny to me a little bit too, because as you pointed out through this whole conversation, like it's construction is a risk game. And we're willing to take on the risk from a project standpoint, but not from a processes standpoint a lot of times.
Well, sometimes that's because we can't charge that back to the owner.
That's good. That's a great point. It is a great point.
The risk you can charge to the owner. The operational risk of getting a new estimating platform, you can't really charge that back to an owner. The capital
That's
investment.
That's a great point,
that, right? But yeah, look, it's the same everywhere though. So this is not unique to construction. I'm an innovation leader in an insurance company, and they say, what's the ROI on that? And so what we have to be mindful of as a whole industry, as a business world, is that you can't simply hire somebody and say, okay, you're now the leader of innovation, go innovate. I need support. I need resources. I need, at the very least, the backing of the C-suite. If not, this is my shameless plug, I think there should always be a chief risk officer at the C-suite table and a chief innovation officer at the C-suite table, because wherever they report into that is not directly to the CEO will influence their remit.
Sure.
Right. So risk managers who report to the legal department are going to look at everything with a legal eye. Risk managers who report to finance are going to look at everything through a cost eye, and so on and so forth. Innovation's the same. So if you have innovation reporting to IT, that's something I'm not a fan of. Here's why. IT's job is to be a service desk. They're to optimize your ability to perform your job. They are to fix problems, and they are to keep costs down. That is not what innovation is doing. Plus, you stick innovation in the bucket of technology, which is not a ubiquitous. Those two words are not interchangeable. So I guess what I'm saying is we're both in the unique positions of being like, okay, well, I'm an innovation leader, and I can only lead if I'm given the support to pursue things that fail. Innovation is about how many things can we fail at till we find the right yes. And if your leadership's not okay with that, then maybe you better pause on hiring an innovation leader, right? Until you can give them the resources. Otherwise, you set them up to fail.
Wow.
Travis, I feel like you want to answer something from the couch here. It's like she just went therapy session.
Yeah,
on you there,
it's like I need to start journaling and stuff more as I think through all my feelings here. This is like you just nailed it. You just nailed it. I think that probably every innovation leader out there is probably suffering through a lot of that. And I don't want to, throw any organizations under the bus because, it is a new role, a new position that they're trying to figure their way through too.
100%. And I'll say this, I'll put a shameless plug in here, a real one this time. We developed a group called the Innovator Circle here. And it's a group of innovation leaders from the ENR top contractors that are our customers. And they come together to solve common problems. This group's been going strong it's coming on 2 years, where we have crowdsourced problems to solve from this group. And we've said, what are your biggest problems? And they list them all out on a Miro board. We've got 50 plus companies involved. We've got 85 members, individual members. And we said, what are your biggest problems to solve? Well, they threw them up all on a Miro board. And then we workshopped what are the most important ones? What can we create a project around? And we set 2 projects in motion last year that were crowdsourced, that this group said were the most important things they wanted to work on together. So you got Turner in the same room with Barton Mallow, with Skanska, with J.E. Dunn, it's really cool. And the 2 projects they wanted to work on, number 1 was effective best practices for tech adoption, right? So everything from the intro to vetting to communicating within the organization, to creating a champion network, to the legal ramifications, contracting, renewal, piloting, et cetera. We had 13 phases within the tech adoption process, and we did a workshop on each one. And then we're going to put together a playbook at the end of the year to share with the industry, or at the end of the project to share with the industry on what this group developed as best practices for tech adoption for contractors. The second project we did was even more interesting. It was called How to Develop an Innovation Team in a Construction Company. Because they all want to know how to do it. So there are some that have robust teams, and there are others that have one gal, and they're like, go out there and innovate, right? And she's like, where do I start? So we had 4 workshops on that one. One was about strategy, one was about funding, one was about buy-in, and we're going to put out another playbook to that effect. So the power of this group is you're crowdsourcing the problems, then you're crowdsourcing the solutions, and no one individually is getting implicated. So you're not saying, Turner says to do it this way, McCarthy does it that way. You're saying this collective group put their heads together and came up with what we believe to be best practices for some processes that do not have yet best practices. It's pretty energizing. It's very fun. It's a fun group. Happy to have you a part of it,
That's
Travis,
awesome.
if you like.
Oh yeah, invite me, and I'm happy to be part of that. And Jeff, I want to jump in with one last question. I think then you'll probably wrap us up here. But so out of that gathering, and this is something I was thinking about. Out of that gathering, out of those discussions, have you, with your role, I'm assuming that you're not only innovating with processes and helping put out these playbooks. Are you innovating insurance products? Are you innovating ideas for tech startups? And then kind of along with that, as you're innovating along those lines on our common problems, how are you also trying to stay up with the innovation around contract methods? Because I think that probably throws another monkey wrench in your works.
As we're listening to these customers talk about their problems, we have unique insight into their problems, and who better to solve their problems than an insurer, which is one of those pillars of how we manage risk. So we have put a couple products on the market so far that have addressed problems that we've learned about just by listening to our customers talk about it. One of them was a insurance product for mass timber, because most contractors were trying to, in the US, we're just starting to get used to using mass timber, and they were getting priced like it was wood frame. But three of us on the call know it doesn't burn like wood frame, it doesn't perform like wood frame, it's nothing like wood frame, and it's not nearly as risky. But it has unique risks that wood frame does not. And so we put an insurance product on the market to address the uniqueness of mass timber where it was not being addressed before. Now, I think there's other insurers that write it now, but we were the first.
That's the thing about leading that process. I have a couple of things I want to dig into. You hit on way too much for me to not go back to, because I just did a bunch of research for my day job around the differences between classic CIO, so Chief Information Officer, and CIO, Chief Innovation Officer. By the way, so do you suggest first that both of those people sit at the table?
Absolutely.
Separately?
Yeah.
Okay. I happen to agree with you. I didn't want to put words in your mouth there, but if I'm hearing you correctly, if it's a core tenet of the business, or a tenant might not be what you would call risk, but it's a core part of what we do, right, is managing risk. So Chief Risk Officer, Chief Innovation Officer, versus Chief Information Officer. My only interesting one was, where do you put the CTO in that? Because most people are like, oh, cool, we don't have a lot of seats, we're just going to miss this seat and call it you a CTO. It's an interesting one to me that comes up.
For a construction company,
yeah,
it might be under the Chief Information Officer, right? For a SaaS company, it's going to have its own seat because that's what it's all about. But I don't know. It depends on the organization. I would advocate that whatever you want to be a priority in your business strategy, have an equal seat at the table. So it depends on the type of company you are. You know, if you're making, shoes, I don't know if you need the CTO at the C-suite. Maybe not. It's hard to say, right? It's very dependent on your business strategy, but just following the tenet that any role that you want to have influence and impact in your company should have an equal seat at the table with the traditional C-suite, which is the Chief Operations Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Legal Officer. I think you're doing it a disservice to bury it within another department if you really want it to be a priority.
Yeah, because they're never going to bring that full piece to the table as you would. It's always going to be, go through, not no offense to anyone, but go through their filter before it gets to the leadership table, and it will always fall behind their own priorities. I have a second one that I'm so excited to see both of those best practices come out. I'm going to want to read through all of that. I think that's something the industry really, really needs. But the how to develop, an innovation team, I think has a unique issue moving forward into next year. It has been really easy for construction and others to grow and talk innovation because we've been at a historical high. I've had a couple talks with innovation folks going into next year that they are worried about being a nice to have versus a must have in a downturned economy. In fact, I had a particular conversation with one person looking at it as an opportunity, like innovation always fell off to the side of the organization, and that going into a negative downturn economy, there's a lot of duplicity that will bring them back in. But I'm interested in you looking down the road at, a downturn and innovation. And I think it's going to test the mettle of construction.
Agree. You know that curve where it's like early adopters and then it's, all the way up to laggards, right?
Yep.
Companies have to decide where they sit on there. And they need to have like a real face-to-face with their identity, because a lot of them think they want to be early adopters, but their risk tolerance is not that way. And they're right. Let's be real about it. So companies, I think, need to take a look at, not everyone's going to be an early adopter, and that is completely fine. We need to have an alignment of where you actually are and where you want to be and what you're capable of, right? Find out where that is on that curve, whether it's, I think it's like early adopters, then innovators, then, as it goes up to mainstream, you get on board when everybody else gets on board. The curve going up says you get on board before there's an established ROI, then you get on board when there's only an established ROI. And as you start to peak down the curve, it's like you only get on board when you absolutely have to. And then at the bottom with the laggards, they want their fax machines back. That curve. Well, if you can figure out where you identify in that curve and align your innovation strategy to match, then you'll be fine. Because if you decide to be an early adopter and you invest a lot into this, you should continue with that regardless of the economy, and you will come out the other side ahead of it. But if you think you're an early adopter and turns out you're actually a laggard, you're throwing good money after bad by investing in that. And if you think that the economy is going to downturn and you make a strategic strategic decision to invest or not invest, you just have to make sure that it aligns with your company culture and what your aspirations are. Because the downturn's only going to last a year, 2 years, right? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And if you're fine with your fax machine, that's okay. But don't hire an innovation leader and that's going to innovate when you won't get rid of your fax machine, right? So you just have to align with where your strategy is and put your innovation leader and your investment and your resources in a place where they're set up to be successful. Otherwise, you're just doing it for show, and that will be very obvious come the outside of a downturn.
You are spot on, and I got that from the book Crossing the Chasm. Is where actually from the technology side of things, I've always sat somewhere in here where I had to go in as a consultant working with James and had to go in and say, okay, we have to have a hard conversation. Like, where do you fit?
You think you want all these things, but you're not ready for it.
Right.
You can't handle the truth.
You're an yeah, you can't handle the truth. That's why we used to call it construction therapy, not construction consulting. Although that really was only things we said behind closed doors. And now, not being a consultant, I can say a little bit more. But you're right. You have your innovators, your early adopters, your early majority, your late majority, and then your laggards. And it's all about your DNA. Who are you? Be honest with who you are. It actually helps you. I think it's going to help anybody who listens to that is going to look at your best practices and actually know then when a technology is ready for them. Because they'll go, okay, in the curve, I sit here. Mm-hmm. So until my friends who sit in this side of the curve are there and it's ready to jump to me, I'm not even going to bother with it. So you gave a lot of wisdom to people listening.
Well,
I also think it's a time to shoot the gap too, right? During a downturn, where do some of the biggest investors make their money?
Buy low, sell high, right? There's another factor in there that you just kind of almost hit on that made me think of something. So you have to evaluate your own self, but then when it comes to adopting technology, it's a whole nother variable. Because they're on the same curve in their maturity of that technology, both in their business maturity, the technology itself, the hardware, the software, their funding rounds, their everything. And deciding to adopt a technology, you have to also consider what level of maturity that technology is, because they could be not there tomorrow. they could just not keep up. So that's a level of complexity that is underestimated.
That's a great point.
It's such a good point because it's about having the right customer at the right time, right? Like some of the best parts of reading the book, Crossing the Chasm, which if anybody out there hasn't read it, it works for both sides to read it because an educated consumer is a better consumer, is not only understanding where you are on the curve, but understanding where that technology company is on the curve, Rose, is so key because we want innovators that want early to get and give ideas and are ready and have a tolerance for failure, right? As you get later on, there's no tolerance on either side for failure, right? As an organization that hits a certain phase, whether you're a VC or you're bootstrapped, you have a different set of needs for where you are and succeeding as an organization. So matching those up is critical. So I'm excited for both those playbooks to come.
You know what else, Jeff?
Yeah.
I've seen very small construction companies want to work with brand new startups. They want to be the first one to test it. I've seen small construction companies only want to adopt it when it is fully baked. I've seen large construction companies want to work with the first out of the gate. They want to work with the startups. They want to watch 10 of them fail and 2 of them succeed, and they want to be a part of it. They have their own VC funds. They have their own enterprise, entrepreneur and training funds. And I've also seen large ones only want to adopt when it's fully baked. So it is a complete, there's no rhyme or reason to this. It's not like large companies only want them fully baked.
It's all over
and
the
small
place.
companies only want them. No. And I love that about construction because everybody's a unique snowflake.
Well, I mean, I think that's true across most businesses with that. Like you have to be honest about what your DNA is and where you fit in it so that you can go after things that make a lot of sense. Travis, I know you wanted to jump in. Anything there you wanted to ask?
No, I was just going to make a comment how I like to live in the valley of despair. That's the only curve I ever really pay any attention to. But I mean, I think it's a great point that you're saying though, is like, I think that, I think it's you, Jeff, that has actually said this a few times in these downturns and with these matching of these rhythms and stuff like that. This is a great time for some of those smaller organizations to learn to punch above their weight, right? To look for these ways to innovate, because I'm not an economist. I don't read tea leaves or anything like that, but usually these downturns don't last forever. There's going to be an upturn. And if all the indicators that we've been hearing for the last 10 years are true, we still have a lot of building yet to do. So when that ramps back up, we better be ready.
And that's actually part of the reason that we created the Innovator Circle, so that the small fish can learn from the big fish and vice versa.
That's important.
I love that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Innovators Circle. I really like that because it isn't about one size. It isn't about it is about the company culture of seizing an opportunity to continually change too. I bet you in those Innovators Circle, there's innovators who want like the speed of innovation to be really, really fast. And there's others who are like, oh, no. Like as we travel around the sun, that's a circle of innovation for us. Like
right.
They all have different speeds. Yeah. So I would love this to go on forever, but we're going to need to jump into the news. Before we jump into the news, I'm going to ask you for some advice for organizations that are thinking about innovation, that really are thinking about the next step. What's Rose's advice to them, especially given the unknowns coming for the next year?
I would, usually this is the point where I talk about the adoption curve or the early adopters curve. But yeah, I would hark back to that. Evaluate your strategy as an organization and align your innovation goals, resources, and ideas around where you want to be as a company. That's the best way to stay true to the North Star, because that respects your business, your profitability, your customers, and your colleagues. Because if you're a laggard organization and that has worked for you, and all of a sudden you decide to be an innovative organization and you don't bring your colleagues and your culture along with you on that journey, you'll fail. So making sure that it's all aligned so that you are not surprising your market or your colleagues. Very, very important.
That's awesome. That's sage advice. I'm going to let you just drop that microphone right there. If anybody's listening and doesn't want news, just turn us off right now. I'm just kidding. Don't turn us off. we have more time. We're going to wrap this one up. We're going to get into the construction technology news of the week. But before we do, let's listen on the second half of the conversation James had with Marcus Kirkwood, Senior Vice President of North America for Fawn.
And I am back with Marcus Kirkwood. Marcus, Fawn is project reports, document management, project collaboration, Gantt charting, task management, checklist, digital forms.
That's correct, yes.
That's awesome. What is the trickle down or downstream effect of the Fawn way?
So first and foremost, it increases profitability and on-time delivery of projects. That's probably enough if we just stop there. But an added benefit is centered around attracting young workers. So young labor requires technology to be utilized in their desired fields. We see it as a bonus. It's not a bonus. It's an expectation from them. So we've made technology digestible for all parties in the industry and beneficial for the smartest minds. So if your tech can't do that, it's probably never going to become commonplace on your job site. So we want to attract young talent. We've created an attractive and efficient work environment by allowing people to utilize Fawn. And if they're going to adopt usable, value-added technology, we see that as a small step toward a more productive job site.
All right, we're here. Travis, what do you got for us this week?
Well, I went out and grabbed a few news headlines like we were apt to do. And the first one I know is not a published article or anything like that. But if you don't follow Nick Espinosa on LinkedIn or on YouTube, you must. Go back to the Construction Dorks X episode where we all wore tinfoil hats, and you'll understand why. But Nick did his breaches of the week in they include the FBI, Uber, Legos, and the IRS. And I think the one that kind of highlighted for me there was the one about the IRS is kind of interesting. I believe it's a Chicago billionaire that's suing the IRS for leaking some of his confidential information. And tongue in cheek, maybe he's just trying not to pay taxes anymore. But there could be some interesting implications that come out of that from the way we obviously with Rose here, we're talking about risk and cyber risk you mentioned earlier is kind of a big concern. What does that mean from a governmental standpoint? What sort of risk are they going to carry in protecting all of our private information? Because they might have a little bit of it.
Maybe they hang on to a little bit there, Travis. The interesting one for me was stay away from Lego. Don't mess. I don't know what they got at Lego because I haven't had a chance to listen through Nick's this week. And by the way, huge Nick fan. I actually dropped him a line. He's always helping construction companies. So if you need a hand, go to him for that, or just for the best meme of the week. If you don't watch, his memes are hilarious.
They are.
And it's always around innovation and it's always around cybersecurity. So, but yeah, stay away from Lego. That's awesome.
And my second one, then, this is interesting for me from CIO Dive. Tech sector layoffs barely dent demand for IT talent. And obviously, this is relevant for both us on the tech and innovation side, but I would think from a larger construction side that we have seen, because of the sniffs and the hints at the downturn coming, we have seen some pretty sizable layoffs, I think, across several industries. And I think a lot of us are starting to think about ways that we could take those workers in and retrain them or whatever. But if we're having these large layoffs and they're not really making dents on the position openings and the like, is like, who are we really fighting for? I mean, is there anybody out there in the work pool that is ready to come in? Because, like I said, it doesn't seem to be that hard once you get laid off to find another job, especially in the tech sector.
So I really like that you brought this one up because I've been talking about this one for consistent amount of time, but now it looks like we might perk some ears. If you're on any one of the Slack channels out there about BIM help and VDC help or IT help in our industry, there's always a backlog. So, and I come from outside of the industry, right? Now I don't get to say that anymore because 6 to 10 years inside of an industry, unfortunately, they've put the bug in my neck or whatever, and now I'm construction. It's not as hard to learn, and I think, Rose, I'll bring this to you for a second because you mentioned this a couple of times. It doesn't matter what your business model is. It doesn't matter if you're selling shoes. It doesn't matter if you're doing this. a lot of these skills translate. So I think it's an opportunity for us to open up construction to new people and bring them in. So what are your thoughts on that changing and upskilling and, bringing people in?
Oh, I have a pretty strong opinion about it, actually. So in a traditionally laggard industry like construction and insurance, by the way, it's a tremendous opportunity for the younger generation of tech natives, digital natives, to take leadership positions where they otherwise would have had to climb the ladder much, much slower. So you think about it, it sounds sexy to be a technologist or a data analyst or something like that and go work for Google. But guess what? You're going to be the bottom of the barrel at Google. You're going to be a newbie forever. Come work for a construction company, you can be leading data analytics in short order. So I think that it's a tremendous opportunity for those professionals to enter. Where there's a lack, there's opportunity. If you can take advantage of that, it's endless potential.
Now, I will caution, though, the one thing is go look for those companies and look at where I think this could be the crossing the chasm episode. Look for a company that fits you
Right.
as where you want to take them. If you're a tech optimist and you want AR and you want to go that route, going to a laggard company to try to pull them along isn't it. Now, if you look at the curve, if you're only one ahead of them, well, that's a good position, right? Because you're always going to be chasing that curve ahead of you. So understand that when you grab them, what you are, what they are, and what kind of company they're coming into, and set realistic expectations on how you're going to move. And then you got a chance to move. I mean, it's a great opportunity, Travis.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a great opportunity. It's always fun to be the leader and but not a leader where you have to whip and drag people along, right? To have that wind in your sails as you're leading into that next step in the curve, hopefully. All right. So my third one, a lot of us in the sector, in the MEP sector have been doing a lot of work with these little small social media companies, building data centers. And for a long time, I think the thought was that they were going to be somewhat recession proof, right? We're always going to need data centers. Data is the big thing. But coming here from Construction Dive, just saw it this morning. Meta, who you may have heard of before, has decided to pump the brakes on a couple of their data centers that they're building in Texas, and one over in Denmark. I had kind of wondered what was going to happen. Like I said, they've been kind of building like crazy over the last couple of years, but I think was it the last quarter here they may have lost a little bit of their stock price, just a few $1 billion or something like that. So I was kind of wondering what that would do to construction, but it looks like it's at least making them pause and think.
What's a couple $billion bucks?
I like this one.
Right?
That's right. Well, whatever.
Chump change.
It's a rounding.
It's a billion here.
It's
It's a billion here. It's a billion there. I took a different one on this one, Travis, when I saw it, because I think it's a challenge next year. And I don't think the data center boom, given what we're seeing when it comes to remote work and people kind of embracing the differences and the changes, I don't think that's going anywhere. So I think the need will continue, but I think Meta taking a pause here because they've had an economic hit is something construction companies need to think about, because I just came out of Procore Groundbreak and a couple others where people are just excited about the large backlog they have next year and into the years ahead. Going into a downturn, though, those are the times that you have to make sure those owners, those builders, they're ready and confident. I think predictability, certainty, the ability for your company to deliver is going to be a huge thing, because once shovels are in the ground, we rarely, unless you're in Las Vegas, leave a building partway up anymore. There's still a few of those there, if you've not to throw a stone or anything, but we rarely do that. So I think getting your owners comfortable and getting in the ground and getting construction going is going to be top of mind and needs to be top of mind for the next 18 months if you're going to really try to ride out what might be an economic downturn of some sorts. Now, on other parts of the show, I've talked about how I think we're the cornerstone to maybe flattening that curve a bit. If we can handle some of those layoffs, if we can push some of our own positivity back in, if we can push some positivity into owners, get shovels in the ground, do some work on infrastructure, do some work on data center. And look, we've got EV, we've got supply chain issues, and the CHIPS Act that's coming back. So lots of good positive things too. But don't think just because there's those positives that something like, I don't know, a couple $1 billion loss might make somebody stop and think for a second. So Rose, I'm interested because you see a lot of these factors from all over the place. What are your thoughts on them checking up on this one, and maybe what kind of an impact that has going forward?
I think we've been through it before. We're going to go through it again. It's not, everybody thinks that what's happening now in the world, and now is a fluid concept, is the worst thing in the world. I have an opinion about the sensationalism of news. And if you've ever read anything by Mark Manson, like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a
Yes, I love them. Yeah. I love him.
So he's got a great article about why I quit the news. If you have interest, Mark Manson, Why I Quit the News, and it's lengthy, and there's a big historical piece in it, and you can kind of skip over that and get the same effect. But everything that's happening now has happened before, and it's probably been worse. Our parents were hiding under desks and thinking that was going to prevent them from a nuclear attack. It's absurd. So, and there's so many survivors today of horrific acts in the last century that I'm not even going to go in. But we read the news every day, and it makes it feel like this is the worst thing that's ever happened ever, and we're never going to survive it. And that's the way they think social media is addicting. News is worse. It constantly makes you feel like if you don't turn in, you are going to miss something, and therefore your life will never be the same, which is all untrue. So I guess that's my existential answer, but we've been through this before. We're going to go through it again. It's cyclical. The economy is cyclical. Construction is cyclical. It's, in the end, I hate to make it sound pedestrian, but it's going to be fine. Right? Yeah. Just don't sensationalize and panic. If you've got your money in a long-term investment and you've got time to ride it out. Same thing with construction. And I would lean on the expertise of those tenured people in our industry, right? There's a lot that folks in my generation can learn from the boomers who are quickly exiting about patience, about we've seen this before, it's going to be fine, it's going to happen again, there's no big whoop. But I think that the crux of our working generation right now is Gen X's and millennials, and we've never seen this before. So we're scared, but it's going to be fine. Yeah. That's what I think.
It's going to be fine. I would agree with you. And I had a thought that when Jeff was talking, and then Rose, you kind of helped me double down on my own thought, was like, because of the way we sensationalize things and the way we think about things, especially as the type of economy that we are, just if we aren't continuing our hockey stick, that feels like a downturn, right? Like we are still making more money than we've ever made before. Maybe that we will, instead of going up 5%, we'll only go up 3% or whatever that ends up being. But that feels like a giant hit. It's like, no. You're fine. Everything's fine. You're still doing better than you were before. You just didn't do as well as you may have projected it.
We are still in an age of abundance.
Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That age of abundance is a big thing.
Yeah. I like the quote. I've heard this from somebody, and I tell this to people all the time because it feels like after we get through, we look back and go, yeah, we kind of saw that before. And the quote was, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly, but it's pretty close.
It's pretty close.
Like, hey,
I've been in this movie before.
Right. It's like a little different. It's upgraded. It was funny. I was like watching. There was like some holiday movie on with my daughter and her friend were watching, and I was like, oh, Cinderella, and she's like, no, it's this holiday movie, and I'm like,
it's Cinderella.
It's Cinderella. It's Cinderella with a holiday twist to it. Yeah. Okay, and I was like, well, let me guess what's going to happen. And they were like, oh, you ruined it. I'm like, well, okay, but like these are the classics, guys. This is how this works.
Exactly. Same tune, different same song, different tune, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. All right. Well, thanks, Travis. I'm gonna do a quick one here that's nice and easy. And nobody listening in is gonna be surprised with this. I am a huge Adam Grant fan. And I was out trying to shake myself of the construction world recently and running in the snow, enjoying myself. And this came on, and of course, it had to draw me right back in. So one of Adam's recent podcasts was Why Data Don't Have All the Answers with data scientist Andrea Jones-Roy. I'm going to tell you, this was one of the best episodes. If you are just grappling with data, just grappling with data science and grappling with all of this stuff mixing around, this is a reality check and a half to listen in on. She does a fantastic job, and Adam's great at asking these questions of data doesn't have the answers. I have been talking about this for a while. I switched from data-driven decisions to data-informed decisions because there is a misnomer that data drives those decisions, and it doesn't. It just informs them. But what I thought was even better was we really have to get to what's inside the data. What are the questions we want to ask? What is it that we want to get out of data? And what is the quality of that data? Where are the gaps in that data? It was interesting to listen to this entire episode where she's literally part comedian, part because she's a stand-up comic,
Awesome.
part-time. She came through, I think she has a political science degree as well, and then found her way into data. So she kind of connects the things together hey, we have to be skeptical about our gaps. We have to be skeptical about where these things come from. We have to ask really good questions, but then also realize that our data could be incomplete. We might need to go get more to fully tell the whole story. The data isn't just and we hear this all the time, it's the gold of the future, and it's I don't know about that completely, So I just thought I'd throw this one in there to start the data conversation. Travis, I know you've been digging and thinking about data. What are your thoughts?
I think it's one I'll have to definitely listen to. Data is very interesting. I think that a lot of us are kind of, on a different kind of curve with the path of data that we keep talking about curves and stuff. And I think a lot of us are still in the mindset of let's just collect as much as possible and we'll figure out what to do with it later. Well, I think it's later. I think it's the time that we maybe should start, digging into it. And to your point is what questions do I even want to ask? And then, we we're going through our own data journey here and kind of having those conversations, I want XYZ metric. Okay. You're missing a third of whatever would need to put that together. Mm-hmm. And you don't really know that until you start to really dig into it. Right. Yeah.
And Rose, I want to pose this to you because it's got to come to you all the time where people are like, oh, well, we just have to get the data. But honestly, and now Travis, I'll use you at Helm as a thing here. And this isn't real. So I'm not calling Helm out, but just think Travis has his people that really love what Travis does and are up on the innovation, right? So they're the ones that maybe are collecting the data more. And maybe you have some others that are reticent to use it. And then maybe they're not fully getting the data. Well, now your data set has a gap. It only tells the story of the one that was optimally using it. So, Rose, I'm wondering if there's anything this brings up to you when you're think about companies looking at data to say, whoa. Maybe you're not getting the full story.
Yeah, I think you said it right, Jeff, in the beginning when you said it's data-informed decisions, not data-driven, because you have to be mindful of what you're looking to achieve from data and not have the tail wagging the dog. So what I tell a lot of tech companies is don't come out the gate talking to a construction company about data. Tell them about the problem that you're solving first. And then the data is a side dish, and it's wonderful if it's good, if the integrity is good. And the data is great, can be great, but don't don't start with the data, because when you do that, you lose them. You lose the contractors right away because they're not it's just like you said, they're not quite ready for it yet. They want to solve problems first, and then the data will be tremendously valuable once they're solving the problem.
And it's the force multiplier, right? If it's solving a problem, then it is spreading. So to go back to the Travises, if Travis looks at that first group and he's getting it, and it's solving their problems, and he can have them articulate that to everyone. Now everyone starts using it. Now that data is actually telling much more of the true story across the board. So you're right. It's a side dish, and I laugh because that side dish can be fantastic, or well, it could really not go along with the meal.
Yeah.
You know, it just depends.
Yeah, because when it's adopted well and it's solving a problem, then the data will inherently be better. But if you start with the data and you're not really solving a problem, then it's, what do we do with all this data?
Yeah, we just got more junk to work our way through. So I like that. I thought this was a great one. If you haven't listened in, and Rethinking, by the way, is one of my favorite new podcasts, but nobody's going to be surprised that I'm big on yet another Adam Grant podcast. I'm going to jump this last one. This is an interesting one. I got this from the CEO at Join, Andrew Zukoski, buddy of mine as well, and shares things in our Slack channel. And I just read this one, and I really know so little about balloon framing and kind of how we got to where we were. And I love a good construction physics article. If you have never checked out the Substack, constructionphysics.substack.com, go check this out. And it's balloon framing is worse is better. That is really interesting, but it's talking about the history of balloon framing. And balloon framing is what most of y'all know, as our houses and apartments are built using light-framed wood construction. This system consists of load-bearing walls made from 2x4s or 2x6s, which supported a wood frame floor or roof, usually either trusses, joists, or engineered I-joists, which none of that makes much sense to me, other than if I look at that versus what's considered post and beamed framed barns, it's a different way and a different level of innovation in the way it changed how hard it was to do things and how much more easily it is to work with the balloon framing than it is with post and beam framing. It required less skilled labor. It requires less understanding of how to secure the framing together because it's distributed across the weight. And so it ballooned and blew up faster. But for me, the interesting thing was that it's actually not necessarily the most effective way, an efficient way, but it grew faster. And it continued to grow faster. And so, Travis, we were kind of having fun with this. Like, the worse is better is still hard for you to understand, but I want to take this out. We're technology. So if you think about it that way, some of the ways it could be thought of in technology is you can build these giant, perfect, all-encompassing, well thought out, perfectly UI'd systems, and they never make it, they're non-usable. They don't spread as fast versus something that's a little rougher, a little faster. Maybe it has a few other quirks, but it works and you can get it rolling and everybody can use it and everybody can do it. I think that's what this article is kind of drawing some comparisons to, but I also just wanted to throw it out there and see what you guys thought of it.
I'm a history nerd, so that kind of it really intrigued me there. And if you know where I live out in the middle of nowhere, where we have a lot of both of these styles of building. And I'm a volunteer fireman, so I've seen the inside of these 150-year-old barns, 150-year-old houses, and stuff. So it adds some color as to why they maybe have changed in construction styles as we were going through it. But as you're going through just your description there and explanation of the worse is better, as we as a Helm specifically as a construction company are one of those very early adopters. It leads me to understand why some of the solutions that we were looking at and going after, if it was just a very small, I don't want to put this on this, make this sound wrong, but a smaller value proposition rather than the thing that does it all. The very small thing was much easier to adopt and to understand and to integrate and get going. It may not have been the best solution, for everything that we need, but it really solved that one specific problem, and it went faster.
Cool. Rose, what are your thoughts? I know I throw this one at you late, so.
Yeah, I'm Googling it right now in the background. So, yeah.
That's okay. That's how we do the news here.
That's the first I've heard of that, being completely honest. I've never heard the term before. To be fair, my background's all in large commercial, civil engineering, balloon framing, mostly for residential, I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but think about this though. So the key to balloon framing versus the old way of doing it was that it spread faster and it was easier and better to do. We're now looking at, and this looks at the end at prefabrication and how prefabrication could learn from this process, in that it grew so fast, balloon framing did, because it was easier to do. It was easier to put together. So they're drawing this idea of, if you have, more and more off-site construction and prefabrication, that you might have to stop thinking so much about these huge systems and start to think about things that people can bite off and chew and do faster and push out quicker. So I thought it was interesting just to challenge the mindsets a bit.
Who moved my cheese?
We're not gonna solve the world's problems here.
Yeah,
today.
I mean, the likening it to offsite and prefab, it's gonna have the same challenges. It may be better, but those who are digging on offsite and prefab are going to adopt it, and those who aren't, they're going to lag behind and look for their cheese. You read that book, right?
I like it.
You don't think I'm just talking about cheese?
Oh no! Who moved my cheese? Okay. Oh yeah, and if anybody listening hasn't read the book and doesn't read books, actually just Google "Who Moved My Cheese" and they have animated it, and you can understand the whole book in I think it's 15 to 20 really minutes simple. Of hilarious animation that will really drive that home. So no, I did not think you were actually talking about my cheese. Although having that conversation has gotten me in trouble before, because somebody at the end's like, "That guy really likes cheese," and it's like. Well, actually, I do. I love a good charcuterie board, but that's not what we're talking about here. This was the last paragraph of it. Buildings see something of a catch-22. There's often an attempt to decrease site work by means of increased prefabrication, but larger prefabricated elements often need to be custom designed to fit the site and the specific building requirements. It's difficult to get both large prefab modules and large production volumes. That's the challenge, and I think that's the challenge of the article.
Also, supply chain. So if you have one manufacturer that you have sent your spec to, it's just like curtain wall or anything else you're prefabbing offsite that is specific to your particular job. If you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you have a supply chain risk. If you're just getting 2x4s delivered to your site and you can build them whenever you can build them, it's a lot easier to source. So that's another issue that, like a steel or curtain wall or any of those proprietary materials that are specific for that job. That's becoming an increase. It's always been a risk, but it's worse now because of the global supply chain issues.
There you go. And that is a little bit more about worse is better. See, we can get there.
Worse is better or worse.
I have, or better or worse. Rose, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and making your way through the news with us and announcing and talking about your new role. If anybody wants to look you up or find you, where should they go find you?
LinkedIn, best place to find me.
And to my co-host, as usual, Travis, it was awesome to sit down with you today and have a chat.
Yeah, always a great time. I always love these conversations, love meeting new people. It's great to meet you, Rose. This is fun.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you.
And thank you for tuning in today to Geek Out for our interview with Rose Hall. To read all our news stories, learn more about apps, workflows, and hardware, and to listen to the show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.